This series was presented by the National Dropout Prevention Center, a division of SPN, the Successful Practices Network. Improving attendance to reduce learning loss was presented to the South Carolina Department of Education by Dr. Sandy Addis, chairman of the National Dropout Prevention Center.
Now, another understanding that we've learned over the years about attendance, policy and law can have an impact. Attendance policies and legislation are important to communicate expectations, but they have minimal influence on the attendance of individual students and are difficult to enforce. Now, we have attendance laws in South Carolina. Many districts have local policies. Many schools have attendance policies at the school level. But here's the thing. We noticed over time when we worked with a lot of schools over the years, those things are very important to us. The parents, they hear about them. They know about them. They know they can get an attendance letter. They know they might get in trouble with a family court or something. But the kids, it's like, what's the attendance policy? What are you talking about? Kids don't attend typically, particularly older students. They don't attend because they're forced to. You can force kids to attend. Some of you that are in the truancy business, I know some of you are, you know that. You can force attendance. But here's the problem with forced attendance. First of all, it wears you out trying to enforce it. And secondly, it doesn't create engagement. Okay, I'm going to school because you make me, but I don't want to be here. And we know what that leads to. Once that occurs, we get the kid back in under forced attendance. So if we're relying just on policy and law to get better attendance, it's not going to be as effective. Not as effective as if you do some other things. Policy and practice. Here's another thing we noticed. Schools can unintentionally deter good attendance by policies and practices. Check and see if you have any policies and practices that might deter school attendance. Let's take grade assignment, for example. You missed too many days last year, so you're going to be in the 10th grade again. You're going to be in a 10th grade homeroom. Now, homerooms are things we have to help us keep up with kids primarily. It's primarily a sorting mechanism and a counting mechanism for us as educators. But think about that. We have a kid that we assign to a grade that they don't believe they should be into. And actually, you think about it, grade assignment simply means I got a 9 or a 10 or 11 by my name. It doesn't necessarily mean how many credits I've got. It may be if we make that practice, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to mean how many credits. I can be an 11th grader if we set the school up this way. I could be an 11th grader with 3 credits. I'm just not going to graduate till I get 21 or whatever the number is in that particular case. So a lot of times we have kids that are overage for the assigned grade, and they don't like that. They don't like the reflection on themselves. They think it's embarrassing, and they don't attend well. And so give that some thought. What about this? Delayed access to the most engaging and relevant courses. A lot of times in school, what we say, particularly in a high school, is, oh, you want to take auto mechanics? Well, you have to get to the 11th grade first. And yet we've got a child that if they could take an engaging course, they might attend and they might stay in school. And so a lot of times using adult logic, we say, well, the fun courses, the good stuff, that has to come late in your career in high school. And yet the fun stuff and the good stuff are often courses that if kids can get a taste of, they will attend, because remember, engagement is so critical. Restricting access of at-risk students to career tech ed courses. We know that career tech ed courses, particularly if it's something a kid wants to take, that they see some purpose in, and they get their hands-on experience, and they get to do something that's fun and active, and whether it's growing plants or fixing cars, kids will engage, particularly at-risk kids. They will put up with English and algebra to get to work on the car. But here's what we often do. We often have policies that say, well, if your grades aren't high enough, or if your attendance is not good enough, or if your behavior is not good enough, you can't take those courses. And so what that often leads to is a kid says, well, heck, I'm just stuck with the same old, the old academic stuff. Nothing's fun here, and I'm not attending. So a lot of times we find that can be a problem without us realizing it. We sometimes restrict access of at-risk students to sports and extracurriculars. Think about that. We know that students will attend because of a sport they like, if they're engaged in it. We know that they'll attend because of some extracurricular, if that's part of the requirement to be in an extracurricular that's fun. But yet we often say, well, your grades aren't high enough, or your attendance is not good enough. And so you can't be in the extracurricular. You can't play the sport. Now, I know that's a South Carolina high school league issue, but if you think about it, there are kids that will come to school, attend school, put up with algebra and English literature in order to play a sport. And so if we can allow as much access as possible, and if it's not the sport, if we can't do it because of league restrictions and such as that, maybe it's an extracurricular. Here, we're in Anderson School District 5, where I'm on the board. I'll tell you a short, sort of interesting story. We had a couple of years ago, several years ago, we had a principal of one of our high schools come to the board and ask for a mid-year small allocation of funds to start a new club. And he wanted to start a bass fishing club. Now, my first thought was, what the heck are we doing as a school district focusing on academics? What the heck are we doing with funding a bass fishing club? And the principal made the point. He said, look, here's the thing. I've got 50 or 60 kids, mostly boys that wear their hats backwards. They don't play sports. They aren't in clubs. They are minimally engaged in school. And I think I can get them hooked on fishing. I think if we will have a sponsor, and we have Saturday activities out at the lake, and we take them to bass tournaments, and we let them hobnob with the professionals, and we let them go out and compete with themselves on the weekends. And we say to them, you must come to school in order to be in our club. He said, I think I can turn some of these kids around. And it worked. And so there again, sometimes if we aren't careful, we'll say, well, you haven't earned the right to be in the sport or the club because your attendance is bad. And actually, it's just the reverse. So we need to consider that. Perception of students. Here's another one. They think about attendance short term rather than long term. Now, I remember doing it as a teacher. We can say all day, if you have good attendance, you will be able to graduate, go to college, and eventually, 10 years from now, you'll have a good career and make good money. And you can buy a nice car. Students don't think long term. They think we do. We tend to think about attendance and how it affects their long-term future. They don't think that way. And when we talk about that, we're probably wasting some breath. They value school for the day-to-day experience rather than for long-term gains. Students choose to go to school not based on this is going to do for me getting into law school 5 years from now. They go to school because school is going to be a good day. School is going to be a good experience. School is going to be interesting. I'm going to see people I like. They like me. I have relationships. I have activities that I want to do. I have things I could want to learn, and I'm going today. That's the way they look at it. Students have minimal concern about attendance policies and rules. I mentioned that earlier. Attendance policies and rules tend to matter most to the educators, secondly to the parents and the family members, and lastly and least to the students. And so again, we need to think about, how do our students think about attendance, not how do we think about attendance. Lost student recovery. Now that's a big one for right now with the pandemic, because we've got students we lost and we've got to find them and get them back. Here's something we've learned. To achieve attendance of students that were lost during the pandemic or that were lost for any reason, here's something we got to remember. We have to guide the student to reverse the decision to drop out. Now think about that for a minute. If I dropped out. I quit. I disappeared during the pandemic. And let's assume I did have access to, to connect, and I could have done something virtually, but I chose not to. I made a decision. It may not have looked like a decision, but at the time, but I really made a decision to quit school. I made a decision to disengage. And I probably told some people. I probably told some of my friends. I probably told them why. This stuff is dumb. It's not interesting. It's hard to get into. I don't like virtual. I don't like school anyway. I don't like Miss Beasley or whatever. So when a student drops out or when a student stops attending, they made a decision and they told people about it. And now what we're faced with, we say, oh, come on back to school. We love you. Come back. Please come back. What we don't realize often is we have to in their mind, get them to change a decision. And then if they have told people about it, we have to also understand that they have to live with, they have to explain it to somebody. You went back to school. I thought you said you hated school. I thought you said school was dumb. What happened to that? Well, I sort of thought differently about it. It's sort of like if we got right now going on in all over the country, we've got this, do we get a vaccine or do we not get a vaccine? Who gets vaccines? That kind of thing. And some people are, and these are good people with giving thought to it. Some people are saying, I'm not getting a vaccine. And I bet you most of the people that are not getting a vaccine have told somebody or told people why they're not getting a vaccine. And then suddenly something happens and they change their mind. To get them to change their mind, they've got to have an aha experience. Somebody's got to get sick. Somebody in their family's got to have a problem with the virus. And then they say, I decided to get a vaccine. And their friend says, well, I thought you weren't going to get a vaccine. I thought you said it was dangerous. Well, I changed my mind. And so we have to understand, when you recover a lost student, we're talking about a change of heart that they have to have. They have to go through that, first of all, not just come back because we said so. And then we have to give them a strong reason to come back. We have to give them a strong reason to engage. We're going to put you in a different set of courses. We're going to have different teachers. We're going to learn differently. We're going to do something different. We're going to give you a reason to come back. They have to undo a decision and then have a reason. And that's critical. And if we're not acknowledging that, we're not going to get too many students to come back. Here's another thing to remember, something we've learned. The reasons students give are not often the real reasons for not attending. We must remember that the stated reason for non-attendance may not be the real reason or the root cause for non-attendance. I mean, we see that all the time. The teachers picked on me. I can't get along with those teachers, and so they come up with these reasons. And many times the stated reason is not the real reason. So when we're working with students that have attendance issues, we have to drill down. And we may never get them to tell us the real reason. They may never admit that the real reason I don't come to school is because I don't read very well. They may never tell us that. But we have to assume that there's some other reasons and then drill down. And particularly when we talk to students about their attendance, why aren't you coming to school? Why did you drop out? Why did you quit participating in your virtual instruction? And they give us a reason. First thought is, and you truancy folks that have these conversations, counselors, you know this, but first thing is, does it make sense? Is the reason or reasons that they're giving, do they make sense? Is this logical? Is this a good reason for why this student probably didn't attend or didn't come back? And, my grandfather used to say, son, if it doesn't make sense, it's about something else. And so there again, we have to analyze what students say may not necessarily be the real reason that they aren't attending. Maybe they aren't attending because they feel embarrassed about something, but they're not going to tell you that. They're going to give you some other reason. So we have to dig deeper into some of the root causes. And lastly, almost lastly, let's think about the role of teachers. You administrators and those of you that work with teachers and you have responsibility for some teachers. What do you tell them about attendance? How do you get your teachers involved? Well, Teachers can promote good attendance in two ways. Now, they can call parents and they can ask students, where were you yesterday, and that type of thing. But here's the real role of teachers. And this is not as easy as we wish it were sometimes. Teachers can maintain positive interpersonal relationships with their students. One of the biggest things teachers can do is focus on the relationships. Do I get along with the student? Do I know them personally? Do I like them? And do they like me? That's important. And if that happens on a broad scale with teachers, students will attend. And secondly, make instruction and the student experience enjoyable, interesting, and relevant. Teachers can harp all day. You missed yesterday. I can't believe you missed. I'm calling your parents, that kind of thing. But the bottom line is, if you don't like me and I don't like you, and what I do for you, what I offer you in the way of a school experience, if it's not interesting and enjoyable, I can harp on instruction, on attendance all day. But if I don't have those two things, you aren't going to attend. And we need to help our teachers understand that these are their two primary roles in attendance. Have positive relationships with your students and make what you offer them in the way of experiences, in instruction and otherwise enjoyable.